Perzen Patel is on a mission. She's the co-founder of a curry paste company and loves nothing more than hearing that ding on the Shopify website. I mean, seriously, who doesn't? That little ding is total dopamine in a sound. But what she really wants to do is shift Kiwis' perceptions about Indian food. The idea many of us have of Indian food is an easy takeaway curry with food that wouldn't be most Indians' normal everyday food. Those curries are rich and often served with a naan bread. More often than not, there's a mild buttered chicken somewhere in that stack of curries sitting there on the table, ready to be demolished. Perzen wants our understanding of Indian cooking to move past takeaway foods and make it about the rich flavours, aromas, and tastes that she experiences every day as an Indian living in New Zealand. Much of her marketing is based around education of what sort of food she eats and how she makes it possible to cook it all while running Dolly Mumma and working full-time in another position and raising a young family. I mean, she is a powerhouse. In pursuit of helping Kiwis become informed, Perzen's now a food writer for the Spinoff, sharing the stories of her own learnings around food and how she had to learn to cook after she got married, trying to impress her mother-in-law in India. I'm lucky enough to work with Perzen as part of my content coaching program. I'm often floored at how much time and energy she puts into creating all the stuff that she needs to for Dolly Mumma around everything else that she does too. If anyone can turn New Zealand into a country where butter chicken and naan takes a backseat to homemade curry with a roti, it's Perzen. Enjoy this episode learning how Perzen's marketing her small business and what she's got planned for it in the future. Welcome. This is Mibbit Marketing and I am your host, Rachel Klaver. I love helping small business owners become more confident and more capable with their marketing. So this podcast is all here to help you do just that. It's me and the help of some great guests helping you learn new skills, new strategies and ideas. Let's jump in and get started. Hi and welcome to another episode of Mibbit Marketing. I am your host, Rachel Klaver, and we're talking today to one of my favorite people. I will just say, I did say this in the intro, but she literally is one of the hardest working people I've ever met, and her capacity to increase her knowledge and desire to learn and then apply it is just out of this world. I mean, she's younger than me, so I'm just banking on that as the reason why she's doing it so well. But she has young kids and she's got a full-time job, and we're going to talk a little bit about how she does that juggle around the stuff. But I'm really excited to have Perzen Patel on our podcast today. I keep on saying it's my podcast. I don't know why I've decided that I'm a multiple personality today. Before we started this, I said to Perzen, and we will do this talking about myself. So I apologize in advance if I refer to myself as we all the way through this podcast. I don't know what's going on with my head. Anyway, so Perzen's going to come and introduce herself before she does, if you do have any questions coming out of this podcast today, do come and be part of the Mibbit Marketing group on Facebook. You can ask any marketing questions in there. And of course, if you enjoy this podcast, please do listen to some other episodes to see if you keep on enjoying it. And if you do, I would love it if you could share it with someone else that you think would enjoy it, because that helps this podcast keep going with viewer numbers and things like that, listener numbers. It makes it easier. Anyway, without further ado, Perzen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel.
It's going to be lovely. And I will just say, because I get into trouble because people sometimes think that I'm just using this as a major advertorial for my entire life. I have actually got your products and they are beautiful. So, if you guys are on the fence, let me just say they are pretty good. I will just admit I haven't cooked with them. My daughter has, because she loves Indian food. And it means I have one less cooking night a week. So I'm very thankful for them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and also how Dolly Mumma came about?
Sure. So I guess when people ask me how to describe myself, I don't know what the correct answer is. So depending on how I'm feeling that day, I'll describe myself as an Indian, as a Kiwi, or as a Persian, because my ancestors were from Persia. But, I've spent equal parts of my life in both New Zealand and in India. And I first came to New Zealand as a teenager at 15. And before I came to New Zealand, I don't think I'd ever eaten butter chicken, but I had more butter chicken in my life between 15 and 22 than I ever have in my whole life. All of my 15 years in India before that. But then for a brief period of time, I moved back to India, fell in love with Indian food there. And then we started, I mean my husband and I, we started this business in 2020 when we had just moved back home to New Zealand with our kids. Yeah. So when I came back, I realized that people's understanding of international cuisine had changed so much. When we now, originally in 2002, people would talk about, like, if we were talking about Chinese food, they'd just have like noodles and fried rice.
Yeah.
But now they knew what Vietnamese was, what Thai was, what Malaysian was. But unfortunately, when it came to Indian food, I just felt like we were kind of stuck in some kind of time warp, because even though this was kind of 18 years after the first time I came here, we were still just talking about butter chicken, tikka masala, mango chicken. And, while none of these dishes are actually even like a thing in India. So I really wanted to start this business because I felt like when I came back, people would keep going to me, "Oh yeah, you're Indian. I'm making curry tonight." And that would really annoy me. And I know it annoys a lot of my Indian friends, but I
Yeah.
realized that like someone has to do something about it. You can't just kind of keep
Yeah.
getting annoyed. And if you wanted to do something, it had to also be easy, because you cannot expect people to, change their behaviors if it is not easy for them to do it. So yeah, I guess it was a culmination of all that frustration, plus the fact that as someone who works full time, I had to come up with kind of curry paste to make my life easy as well. So it was kind of these two problems joining together, which led me to the idea of Dolly Mumma.
I
And
really love that. I actually, I'll just say, my mum, she's a cook. She does food writing too, and she she actually used to do a thing where she'd choose a cuisine a year, and that's all we'd eat. And one year we did Indian, and we didn't have a single butter chicken during that time. My little Kiwi palate, she used to do things pretty hot. My dad liked pretty hot curries, and so I would be like, and then she'd make like dry things and other bits and pieces, and not just, but she would just walk through like a traditional Indian cookbook and just basically do all the different things, and I was considered so weird at school. Like, I think it is interesting, like how we don't realize the filter, especially until we go traveling, the filters of our own idea of what an ethnicity is. And we have a Kiwi dies. Oh, we put down Americans for their Americanized stuff, but Kiwis have done exactly the same thing, where we've Kiwidized a whole lot of different ethnic flavors or cultures, really, and then made them some sort of Kiwi form of it. Do you think?
yeah, I think so. By the way, I love the idea of kind of a whole year of one cuisine. That is so cool.
It was great, except for the year where she did like a whole year of making different breads every day. Like, she was going through like a 5 kg thing of flour a week. And because she had like a tennis elbow, and she'd been a potter and she couldn't do her pottery. So she was using the bread as a release. We all put on so much weight because like, I mean, it was the happiest year I've ever had. But yeah, she was considered odd because we had like Mexican flavors and Indian flavors and Asian flavors, and everyone else around me, that, because I'm 50, their idea of ethnic was spaghetti bolognese, and they thought that was cutting edge. And like, I was like, dude, you have to come to our house. Like, it's not, we're having like weird way out stuff here.
Yeah.
It is kind of cool. It is kind of cool. So
But I just,
yeah,
sorry, I wanted to tell you though that what
yeah,
you picked up around that the school lunch boxes, you said that
yes,
your friends used to kind of think that was really weird, and that was one of like the key reasons I started, because obviously my kids have come to New Zealand, like, when they're just 2 and 3, and I didn't want them to go through that same thing, like, because when
yeah,
I moved here, my mum, would pack me, like Indian leftover stuff in my school lunchbox, and I remember growing like kind of ending up in a place where I was so ashamed of my Indian heritage, because I just wanted to fit in, and I'd have these like yuck ham sandwiches, which I absolutely hate,
yeah.
only because I wanted to fit in. And that led to so much of like me hating my cuisine. And so I really didn't want that for my kids. And so yeah, that's like the kind of bigger version for why we started.
So let's just talk about that, because I am deeply curious about that. Rod, my husband's Dutch, and he used to take smoked herrings to school, which I mean, I'm half Dutch too. I think that's disgusting, but he loved it, and he likes smelly food. But what is like, let's just break this down a bit, because one of the things I found really fascinating watching some of your content was I had to shift my idea around Indian breads. It was like just a little thing, but like, people when they order bread, they order a naan, but actually day to day, if you're having bread, you'll tend to have a roti. Is that right?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
that's quite a big difference.
That is such a big difference because we would only have naan in India if we went out as well, or if we were
Yes.
ordering out as well. Like no one's sitting around at home
With
making
the
naan
tandoor.
because or with a little
Getting
tandoor.
their tandoor at home, getting their naan in
This
there.
is like, that just reminds me of when I went to McLean's and someone asked me, "Oh, did you used to go to school on an elephant?" And I was just like, it's like, no, I lived in Mumbai. Like,
There's not enough room for everyone to park their elephant outside the school. So what would you eat? Like, what would your kids take to, like, when they were in early childhood and then also in primary, what sort of food would they take?
So, like, I am trying to diversify their palettes, but like, so we'll have like a potato sabzi, which is just potatoes that have been stir fried with mustard
Um,
seeds and cumin seeds and things like that. So it is like roasted potatoes, but
yeah,
it's like
there's a bit of
Indian
flavour.
potatoes. And
Yeah.
other kids might bring sandwiches. I like to give them like rotis that have just been wrapped up with some little vegetables inside with cheese and things like that. So it's just kind of the small touches, but I want them to just be embraced for that and not be made to feel like less than because it's different.
I went to my daughter's prize giving last night and I actually cried. I haven't admitted this to my husband who was sitting next to me, but it was a cultural and arts prize giving, and we live in a very European white area. And so the cultural group, there's an amazing Kapahaka group, but the Pacific Island group's very, very small. And there's one guy in the Pacific Island group, and he got up and did a solo dance, which was tremendously beautiful by himself on the stage because
Wow.
there's no one else, no other male in his culture at the whole school. And I was like, how amazing is this guy to stand in his culture and not only that, share it with us and show us what it's like, which is what you actually are doing in lots of ways with your kids. They're little ambassadors, really, and you go, how powerful is that? And then I was like, and I'm so thankful that our world is changing. It's not changed enough, but it's changing that we can actually start to really value and understand all those levels of culture is what is really important to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the powerful things about what you're doing is by trying to make us break up with butter chicken, not permanently, but just as an everyday curry,
Mm.
you're helping us see another layer, and
Mm.
one of the things that really struck me with your writing around this, which I want to ask you about, is I think the thing that struck me is I actually made this racist assumption, I think it's racist, that all Indian women got taught how to cook. I
Yes.
think because I'd read something like that, and I was like, "This is part of the history, you go and do everything and you have these things you learn," but was that true for you?
No, that was really not true. Well, it's even worse because I went to uni. I went to university and I studied hospitality. So you would
Oh,
think that
so
I
you
would.
yeah, okay.
So you would think that I knew how to cook Indian food, but yeah, when I was in New Zealand, I think because I went through that phase in college of really being kind of ashamed of my food, I just really did not want to learn anything to do with Indian food. But I mean, I didn't learn how to cook, so I learned how to make rice, and like
Mm,
I was always the kind of continental chef, so I'd always make the pasta at home and the nachos at home and that kind of thing. But I never wanted to learn Indian food. And in fact, and I guess it's just kismet that then I met this really typical Indian guy, moved to India to live with my in-laws, and then I was like, oh my god, I don't
that's
know
a
how to cook
shock
any Indian food.
because correct me if I'm wrong, but in Indian culture, that whole cooking side is quite important, especially with, although it's breaking down, because I know your husband also cooks, so I know that it's breaking down, but traditionally, there's been that role, hasn't there, the expectation?
Yeah, I think it is changing in India as well, but
Yeah.
that expectation continues. And I guess it's partly because, Indian men are kind of treated like they're direct descendants of God. We
Mhm.
all are
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
but, Indian men are just like another category.
They
And
truly believe it. They live and breathe it.
yes, exactly. And so I guess it's taking a while to change, but that does mean that, if you get married, and especially if you're like living with your in-laws, there's that expectation that you'd be cooking, and
Mm.
or at least you'd know how to cook. So I,
Yeah.
I, I got lucky. I lived in a place where, I lived in a home where we did have a cook who would come, but I still didn't even know how to cook like the basics. So
And I totally relate to this because I was when I first my first marriage, I was living in a really conservative Christian sort of not community like a cult, but like in an area with a bunch of, and the whole thing there was your house had to be immaculate. You had to fill your tins, and you cooked everything from scratch. And I'm the income earner. I'm floaty. I don't want to keep my house tidy. And I so struggled. I felt so penned in with this expectation that was suddenly given to me because I'd suddenly become a wife. So I can understand there's like, it's kind of cool when you're in that situation, you're learning those skills, but there's also this kind of, I can feel sometimes there's this a rigid thing around it as well.
Yeah, I think for me at that time, I guess because I was newly married, it was not that rigidity, but for me, it was just, I was really, because I didn't even know my way around like the Indian ingredients or
Ah,
anything like that, so I'd go to the shop and I'd ask for like chickpeas. But in
mm.
India, chickpeas are not served in a tin. You actually get the dried chickpeas. But I'd never seen dried chickpeas in my life. And so, I'd call mom and be like, but these guys don't understand what chickpeas is. Like, how do I explain what chickpeas is? So it was stuff like that,
Yeah.
especially because I was moving back from New Zealand to India. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think, do you feel like this is part of you also, like the pace that you've made, are they quite strong and true to what you would have, if you were making paste in India, what you would do there? Or have you changed them for a Kiwi palette?
I don't think we've changed them for a Kiwi palette. What we have done is we've just tried to make them super versatile. So, to give you an example, when we originally started Dolly Mumma, we only started with 3 products, which was my grandmom's curry, we did a ghee, and we did like an Indian everyday paste, which kind of makes your basic kind of you can use, it's like the pasta sauce of India. It's like the basic stuff that is always there. But I realized very soon that if we wanted to grow, we had to have products that people were at least kind of semi-familiar with, because
Yeah.
if there was zero familiarity, then that journey to educate was much harder. So we've not adapted our product like it tastes exactly like it would taste, but I've had to kind of give up my ideals of like no more butter chicken to like be like, okay, we'll have a tandoori paste and we'll have like a korma, because people know what that is. But then we've taken those things that they know and really packed in the traditional flavor. So when you have that and you have like a normal supermarket korma, you're like, oh, that's not the real thing. Now I can understand it. Yeah.
Which is clever. It is interesting though that you've done that kind of accession to people having to have something that's more familiar, but you have held out when it comes to butter chicken.
Yes.
It's
And
your
that's a
bottom line.
struggle. That's a
Yeah.
struggle for me because like my husband goes to the farmers markets and he'll come back and be like, 10 people asked me like, oh, don't you have a butter chicken paste? And like, why don't we just make it? You can make it so that it's authentic, but it would like really increase our sales. And I'm just like, no, we are not making butter chicken. Because I think for me, I mean, yes, that's part of our story, but for me, I don't like the beyond butter chicken is not really like a tagline. It's really for me like the values of our
Yeah.
company. Like you speak in your book about like
Yeah.
how you use your values. And I really use it as like a decision making thing. So for me, it's like that is part of my value, and we will not like sell butter chicken, because if we want to educate people, yeah, I don't want to.
And what I like about this is that you have done the right. It's hard when you've got a line, but actually to get to that line, you have to soften the approach. You don't have to fall over and give them everything someone wants. So you don't have to do the butter chicken, but you've softened it with the korma, with the sagwala, with the tandoori paste. You've brought people. You can still bring people on that journey,
Yeah.
get to the next point of it. Because one of the things I think that I found really interesting about your paste is that the natural inclination is to just buy the korma one, for example, and then just use it for a korma. But
Yeah.
what you say, and this is what I am still trying to get my head around, is that Indian food isn't just curry. Like, this is where I can see that I've got some blocks. Indian food isn't about curry. It's about the flavors that we use in all of our cooking for everything. And so it's not just a curry. It might be in a dip, or it could be spread on bread. It's just about adding that flavor, that depth of flavor in those spices. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it's similar to when we started with, like, say, Japanese food. People were like, oh, Japanese,
Yeah,
so I'll go have sushi, or like Mexican, I'll go have nachos.
yeah,
But like, Mexicans about like the flavors of like those earthy flavors like cumin and coriander and things like that. And
Mm.
so that's what I want for people to do with Indian food as well. Like, I really want
Yeah.
you to embrace like the core flavors and the techniques, and then you can go do whatever it is you do with it. So, on our blog, we've got like, you can use the korma paste on a rack of lamb. And so make, something that's very familiar to you, but just like, ditch the salt and pepper. Try these
Yeah.
amazing other flavors. Yeah.
Yeah, I really find this interesting because I think about that with sushi. I remember when the place I used to live in was a place called Rangiora, which is not like, it's a beautiful town. I loved living there. But I remember when the first sushi place opened. I also remember when the first Indian restaurant opened there too, and it was big news because they had like Kiwi curries and then they had actual curries, and they used to say divide it. But one of the things I found was really interesting was it was a big deal for some people to eat raw fish, whereas to me that's like that is sushi, and people are like, oh, I'll only eat sushi if it's a round roll with cooked chicken in it. So I
Yeah.
do think I can see where that kind of thing of going like introducing something's really important, but it is taking people to that next step of understanding all the things that they could be
Yeah.
doing with it.
Yeah.
And so with Dolly Mumma, like we will talk. I want to talk to you a little bit about how you're juggling things because I find that really fascinating. But in terms of the business itself, you said that you launched it in 2020, and you did mention before markets. Was markets always on the plan for you? Like, was that always part of your growth strategy?
So when I started this business, I was really lucky because I went through the Kitchen Project, which is this Auckland Council
Oh,
food
cool.
incubator, and they really kind of helped us. And the main thing they helped me do was get my food license. But I remember at that time they were like, you'll need to go, like, this will be really useful if you want to do farmers markets. And I was really against that because I was like, no, I don't want to do farmers markets. We're just going to have an online shop, and we'll be like in all the countdowns in 6 months. And obviously this is me being very ambitious.
It sounds
I,
amazing, though.
I lean
Well
towards
done.
optimism. And my mentor there was like, you know what, don't discount farmers markets, just go try them. They're a great place to get that face-to-face feedback. So for me, it was always like, okay, we'll do this thing from a feedback perspective. We'll try it out and see what people are telling us at the markets.
Mm.
But what we fast found was, selling online is really not that easy. The Shopify guys tell you, oh, set up your store in 2 minutes.
Mm.
What they mean is you set up your account. Your store is not going to get done in 2 minutes. And yeah, so that makes life. I just realized really quickly that the online part was going to be something that I had to slowly build out. And so what happened was that the traditional farmers markets became like our bread and butter business.
Mm.
And they have been really great from like a brand building perspective.
Yeah, because I think back on like the first time I ever tried Pix peanut butter was at a market, and he grew his entire business by getting people to sell his product at markets, well, nationwide. Like he just gets someone on a dinky little card table often with some Pix peanut butter. And I do think like the people I've talked to who've grown beyond markets and have quite a big following, all of them started with a market, because it is that thing where you get that amazing feedback. You can explain why you don't do butter chicken. You can build those relationships, and you get those regulars who just love seeing you every time they need to come get a paste.
Yeah. And like what we found was when we originally started the markets, people were really wary. Like, they were like, oh, no, 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 I don't want to have spicy food at 8 in the morning. But all we now focus on in the markets, and I heard this on a podcast, which I think flipped the switch for me, was like, my goal at the market was not to sell. My goal at the market was to get people to taste the product, because
Mm.
that is something that you cannot do in a supermarket. And so when we switched our focus to being like, my goal today is there's 500 people here, and I want to make sure that at least 300 people taste the paste. And then we'll let the product do the talking.
Face to face.
Yeah.
I really love this because I do think it's really hard to switch off the selling desire when you're at a market because you're conscious you're using your time and you want to get sales, right?
Yeah.
And and actually what you've done is flick that switch, which probably has made it easier in your content marketing to also flick that switch and trust it too. Would it be
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's very, I know again with e-commerce, the traditional kind of thing is just set up Facebook ads and just start going. And, I really held back because I've heard these really horror stories about people wasting heaps of money on Facebook ads, unfortunately, and agencies and things like
Yeah,
that.
it can get.
Um,
Look, I'm not a fan of it for startups, to be honest. We often really discourage people who are startups to use Facebook ads, because what we want to do is get you to have people have a familiarity with your brand and what you do. So markets do that. And
yeah.
markets do that. And this idea that this Shopify site, like we've got a Shopify site too. And, I'm always like, oh, there hasn't been any sales. And then I'm like, when was the last time I talked about the stuff on that Shopify site? Like, and I'm like, oh, and then I'll mention something and suddenly it's like ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, well, this is the problem, right? We get this idea that we set up this website and it's just going to magically generate stuff. And like you, like even with us, knowing how to do Facebook ads, they're really expensive when the product is unknown or the person's unknown. So,
Yeah.
I love that you've done the markets, and I think it does work really well. In terms of like moving forward with Dolly Mumma, like, can you see them as maintain? Are you still going to do the markets? Do you think that that's going to be a long-term strategy for you?
Yeah, so I definitely think it will, because I'll tell you why. I've gone through this whole phase of when I started the business. If you asked me what was the future of Dolly Mama, I would have told you, we wanted to be Patex like 2.0.
Yeah.
Like Patex got Indian food into people's pantry, and now we wanted to kind of change it. And that was for a really long time my goal. But then I realized that, that comes with its own um
Costs.
barriers to the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we'd have to kind of like double remortgage our house to even
Yeah.
be able to afford it. And the supermarket wholesale game is like a whole other game. Most people say that to even launch an FMCG, you need at least $150,000 to launch. And
Yeah.
I started my business with like $500. So I was just
Which is
like,
amazing, right? Yeah.
yeah. But I guess I came to terms with the fact that there's more than one way of doing a business and having a successful business. And so I don't think at this point the supermarket path is for us. And we've really recommitted ourselves to selling direct to the customer, however that is. So I think farmers markets will continue to play a part. We want to eventually be in more farmers markets. Once we get people on that kind of education journey a little bit more, because for us it's always a struggle to find, because I work full time, who's going
Yes.
to go to the markets.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
waiting for my kids to
exactly.
grow up so that they can become my little
Pocket money.
employees.
Yeah, exactly. They can
And
go
then
up
I'll
their
send them.
van. Because I think what I really love about that is, I have interviewed a lot of people who are FMCG in this podcast. And by the way, someone asked me the other day what that means. FMCG stands for fast moving consumer goods, things you'd find in a supermarket or a pharmacy, things that move off the shelves fast. And I think that people I've talked to, the only way that people have grown is if they have decided, I'm going to have external investment, which changes your potential of, you might then get a shareholder who goes, look, I know you said beyond butter chicken, but we need that butter chicken in there, baby. Like it's
Yeah.
like, and then you'd fire them for calling you baby because that's, sexual discrimination. But like I do think that there's a choice, and both choices are equally as valid.
Yeah, and I think we saw that. So for a brief time, we were stocked at Farrow Fresh, and I love that experience. I was so grateful to have been inside Farrow Fresh, but it was a huge learning experience for me. That even then, as a small business, and Farrows are very respectful of the artisans and the businesses that they deal with, but I could start to see that we had to make all these kind of trade-offs, where we were like, oh, do you want to put more preservatives in so that you can extend the shelf life of the product, or your product's not really moving in the chilled aisle because people look for Indian products in the Indian aisle. But I really saw myself as being kind of so we really didn't want to compromise on the product, and which is why we ultimately said that we'd kind of stick to our guns, and we'll see how that game plays out.
Well, I love it. I think it's good. I think it's good to stick to your guns until you feel like you need to change. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. And so one of the things I was going to ask you about this is obviously one of the things you've managed to achieve, which is amazing. So Perzen is a gifted, I'm speaking to you guys, audience, you people now listening. But Perzen is a really gifted writer, and I'm really lucky that I get to work with her. But truly, in terms of her writing, there's nothing much I can really actually teach her, because she tells a beautiful story. And Person, you now are a columnist for the Spinoff, and I know that part of the joy for you is that from talking to you in the past is that whole thing about how so many writers about different ethnic foods are not of that ethnicity.
Yes, that's a big one. And just before
Yeah.
I came on this podcast, I don't know why, someone sent me a link to $15 fakeaways. And that one had a butter chicken in it, which does not
Oh,
have like 8 of the ingredients that you'd put in a classic butter chicken.
oh no,
And it's
that's
got
oh.
and it's got tomato sauce inside.
I was gonna
butter
say, I
chicken.
bet it's got tomato sauce in it. Like, it will just be revolting.
It was just, I read the ingredients and I was like, ugh, I don't want to eat
You
that.
should
But
make it for a video. You should make it, and then, like, the way that it smells is
yeah, but
yeah, that is the thing though, isn't it? Is that it's so powerful to have someone who's actually a cook in that culture who understands the culture behind that recipe, talking
yeah.
about the recipe.
Yeah, I think it's really important because you really need that, like you were saying before, that we tend to be in our own little kind of, we have our versions or our ideas of what an ethnicity is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what food writing is, right? Like it's about exploring another culture through food. And if you're going to do that, I feel like you do need to give that person a chance to, I mean, at least if they exist. Like, okay, if we
Yeah.
lived in this kind of place where there was no Indians at all in New Zealand, then like, yeah, sure, get someone else to write. But there's so many other talented food writers within a specific culture, or they're like me, they're kind of like Indian Kiwi, so you kind of have a foot in both the worlds. So yeah, why not give people of those cultures a chance to kind of talk about their cuisine? So that's one. But I think my other pet peeve, and I mentioned this on LinkedIn this week, was also a lot of people have this perception like, I just want to get to the recipe, so I don't want to read all the
I saw your comment. I was like, go you, Perzen.
I was trying to be really respectful because I really love Notion.
Yeah.
But someone over there referred to all the bits at the top of the recipe as like the fluff, like I just want to get to the recipe. But then that's what happens, because if you've not read the fluff, which gives you the context to the dish and explains why you do something or explains the technique to you, then you do these things where like, oh, okay, I'll just put like tomato sauce instead of that, and how it's not going to change anything. And I guess I'm more cognizant of that because I've been there very recently. When I learned how to cook Indian food, I was right there. I was like, oh, I'll just like swap this thing for this thing. It's not going to make a difference. I'll put fenugreek seeds instead of leaves, but they're actually 2 completely different ingredients. And you need that context to understand. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's quite beautiful. I quite like reading that. I mean, if it's pages, I find it a bit tricky, but I always love reading the pre-blurb because I feel like I'm getting an insight to why that person felt it was really important to choose that recipe to share with me. I'm going to ask you, I ask these questions sometimes that go a little bit off track. And sometimes I ask this question of someone else on a previous podcast, and he was like a bit taken aback. And then he said, I was really glad. It was actually Sam, and he's an accountant and he's from Malaysia. And I asked him about racism in New Zealand, because one of the things I find really fascinating, I'm not going to talk about racism here necessarily, well, it might move into that, but like the Indian community in New Zealand is actually really big.
Yeah, there's
Really
about
big.
300,000 of us.
Yeah, but I feel like they're really underrepresented in New Zealand. Do you think so?
I think at least when it comes in the media, most definitely. And especially also in like the food space. But then I also feel like part of that is our problem. So I'll give you an example. Every Indian I meet, we'll go to a cafe and we'll snigger if we see like turmeric latte on it. We'll be like, ha ha ha, like look at these people, they put turmeric latte on there, but I feel like, and maybe this is a wrong perception to have, but I feel like it's on us to also like build that bridge. Because if we don't make that step and we don't kind of share like, hey, actually, this is a thing that people in India have been having for thousands of years, and let me show you the real way of making it, by the way, it's not turmeric latte, it's this, then you're creating a dialogue and you're allowing that person to truly understand why you're kind of getting all riled up inside, if that makes sense.
No, I do.
But
I get it. Because I also think that I understand it a bit from the fact my mum's Dutch, and the Dutch have done a very good job of any country they've come into of just acclimatizing themselves so much that you can't even tell that they were Dutch. Like, they just dropped their culture. And one of the things I really love about Rod is that his mum and dad didn't do that. So I've got quite a Dutch New Zealander as a partner in terms of things that he likes. And he came to school with the smelly herrings. But it is interesting to me, because I do think that part of this is that we do box up a culture around the foods we see, or, we start now we're understanding Diwali, it's a festival of lights and it's all lovely, but not really understanding what it's for example, which is a huge, I mean, you just had it.
Yes, Diwali's just gone.
Yeah, and that's a massive time of the year for you, but most Kiwis probably wouldn't really understand what it's all about.
Yeah, they would just see it as this thing like, okay, there's an IoT square, there's some dancing and there's fireworks. And in fact, I just wrote a piece for the Spinoff this weekend, which was a Diwali without fireworks, because I grew up celebrating Diwali completely without fireworks, and I used to think that was a complete bore until it's one of those classic, actually my mom was right stories.
Yeah, because she was actually teaching you the real reason why Diwali was actually around.
Yeah, exactly.
So with Dolly Mumma, like, tell me, besides the spin-off, like, what are some challenges or things that you really enjoyed either way around marketing for Dolly Mumma? Besides, so you've got your markets. I know, and I'm just going to talk about this because I'm going to Skype for you, because it was something that I suggested you do. So I'm also Skyping for myself. But one of the things I told you to do was to email your list more and share. And you did an amazing thing, which I'm just going to tell everyone else to do, because you worked ahead and write a lot of those emails in advance so that you wouldn't get overloaded.
Yeah, that was just such a brilliant learning. I mean, I've always known the theory of it, but I guess having the opportunity to work with you in the Content Master Web, coaching, was that I had that accountability, and like I told you that I was going to do it, so then I had to go do it.
But that's what you do. You just go and do it, which is amazing.
Yes, I think I respond well to external accountability. I learned that about myself, so I try to
and external pressure and external rewards. When someone says well done, I also like that as well. Doesn't it take much? But how are you juggling this? Because you've got young children and a full-time job. You are incredibly well read. You've done the alt MBA this year with Seth Godin, which is iconic. You've done pretty much every opportunity that you've been able to get your hands into. You've taken all in. When do you sleep, and how do you manage this?
I guess, well, firstly, I'm very lucky because I have family to support me. So I have my husband works in the business full time, so he looks after all the production of the pace. And so that's really helped us, because when I started the business, I used to kind of do all the production. He'd go to the farmers markets because we were both working full time at that time. And then we really decided that, no, this is what we wanted to do. So he kind of quit his job. And so now he manages the production, which is amazing, because this guy doesn't even know how to cook rice. And here he is cooking all of our product.
That is amazing. Oh, actually, before you say that, can you just tell me how you cook rice? Because people are going to be shocked.
Yes, so the easiest way to cook rice is to just put it like pasta in a giant pot of water with like excess water and just salt it. And then exactly like pasta, when the grain is cooked, you just drain it all out. And if you actually drain out all the water, all the starch that's in the rice, which is what dietitians and nutritionists tell you is the unhealthy part of rice, that actually comes out. And so you get these beautiful fluffy grains. And that means you can have as much rice as you like.
There we go, everyone. That's how you cook rice the Indian way.
Yes.
It's amazing. So you've got him helping, and then you do the marketing, plus you do the writing.
Yeah, so I think having that division, and we only did that, I think, late last year, but that really kind of helped me focus. And so my focus moving forward is, we make X amounts from the market. How can we get that same amount online? So, we're kind of spreading out our risk and developing this other source of revenue, but realizing at the same time that marketing is a long game. Like, you can't, and especially content marketing. It's not like you can like go write a piece and all the money is going to come in. So having that segregation has really helped, because now I don't have to worry about like producing the food. And so that's helped me kind of work on the business while he works in the business, so to speak.
That's a great
Um,
combo. It works well.
yeah, and I think he has zero interest anyways in kind of all the new products and things like that. And we balance each other out quite well, because he's the, the Scrooge of the business. Like, we're not spending anything. I have to
Got one of
submit a
those.
business case for like, if I want to spend like a $40 software, like, why do we need it? How is it going to improve? How much sales are we going to get? Blah, blah, blah.
I will
And
actually tell
I'm,
you. I shouldn't tell you because I like keeping this. I'm used to keeping secrets, but I've just like created a little surprise for you guys. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I had to like create like a big long plan of why it was justifiable for me to give you guys a treat. It was like, well, explain to me why we would do this. Like, because I'm just like, well, because it's a cool thing, but I had to give them actual reasons, business reasons.
Yes, but what that helps is, I'm really grateful for it. And on the flip side, like, while I find it really annoying day to day, it does mean that our business is kind of really
Oh,
lean, and we're only spending the money where we need to spend. Because, in India, I had another catering business, which had all the it looked successful. We had a kitchen, we had staff, and all of that kind of things. But I was not happy because I was not making as much money as I'd hoped to be making. And actually, that is, like you say, often that is actually kind of the core reason why you get into the
yeah, it is.
business,
You
to
have to
make money.
remember, it's really weird. We often forget that the reason we are in the business is to make money, and it's okay to make money.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I don't know why, so especially with women-led businesses, why it's such a big mindset thing that it's actually okay to even say out loud, I want to make money. And we've got a great phrase, which I'm going to give to you now, Perzen, which is earn more, work less.
Yes. I don't
And
know
I
when
think
that
it's
will
a
happen.
great phrase. Don't you think?
Yes, yes. So yeah, I think the juggle is always gonna be a juggle, and I don't quite know how I make it work. But I'm a big systems girl, and I think that really helps me. I've got my entire business, kind of all the SOPs done, everything set up inside Notion, and I really kind of keep a track of everything
Your
there, so that
Notion
then
is
I can.
beautiful. Yeah, I should do a podcast on Notion because people probably don't know what it is. It's an amazing, it's based on a spreadsheet platform thing, but basically it's a way of organizing all your ideas. We set as part of the Content Master Web. I think Perzen, you did yours, and then I had like two people say to me, how did she do that? I went, you got given the same details as she did. She just made hers look amazing. And I do a couple of one-on-one sessions with people was going through how to set theirs up. But I think like using something like that is powerful because you have got a brain that's just everywhere, and finding a way to bring it down and focus is really key for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think like I end up using Notion as kind of like my own personal Google. So I just, every time I have an idea, and I struggle with this because I suffer from shiny new toy syndrome. It's good to like say I suffer from it.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. It's part of the healing process.
Yes. And so, I try to, so at least this allows me to have a place to put all my ideas, and then I know that eventually I'll get to them. But it acts as like, yeah, so I really have all my setup done in Notion, which I find really useful. And I try to always like kind of block my calendar to help me with the emails part. And like I book in, I think I do like an hour every fortnight, which is in my calendar for media,
That's good.
because yeah, that was one of my kind of core goals this year, was to get 12 pieces of media coverage, and that's only happened because it's kind of consistently in my calendar.
That's clever. I really like that idea. I am actually, I'm going to tell you a hack. I haven't actually, I was going to share this. I'll probably share that with the group in a few weeks' time. But I've got this new hack for I'm always changing how I do my to-do list. But I've got a new one, which is at the end of the day, I send myself an email. I'm not allowed to open the next morning with my list of the things I need to do that day. And at the end of the day, I go through that, take off the stuff I didn't get to do, add that to the next day's email with a few other things, and then send that to me that night to be open the next morning. And it's working really well for me because
Oh, that's a
I'm
good
such like a
idea.
respectable person. I'm like, okay, this is the list. And I just write it down on a piece of paper, do it, check it off.
Yes, yes, that is a good idea.
It'll
I like
last
the
for 2
idea
weeks.
of like.
Yeah. It won't last forever. The cool thing about being ADHD is I have every technique you could possibly imagine for someone to try. So I've tried them all. So if people want to know how to find Dolly Mumma, besides what markets are you at? first?
So we are at the Parnell Farmers Market on a Saturday. Every Saturday, that was one of the first markets we started, and we got this brilliant stall, which we think is very lucky. So we go there every Saturday without fail. And on a Sunday, we're at the Greyland Farmers Market.
Oh, I like that place.
Yes, it's very posh.
It is very posh, yeah. Nice and feel posh.
Yes. It's got a brilliant, actually, I love it because it's got a lovely playground and it's very kid-friendly and things like that as well. And besides that, we will probably do a few other like extra Christmas markets, but those are like our 2 regular spots. But we do ship across New Zealand as well.
Yeah, and where do people get it online?
So online, we're just on dollymumma.com, and it's MUMMA.
Cool. And I've got a link to that in the show notes for people who want to get it. Plus, I've linked to Perzen's Spinoff columns in the show notes too, so you can have a read of her beautiful writing. Perzen, it's been a real pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you, but thank you so much. And I think one of the things that I hope people have taken away from here too is just, I think we can become very androgynous in New Zealand around culture and different areas. And I think as business people too, there's a real opportunity for us to seek out and find new voices that can also, sometimes it's good for us. Sometimes, like I like the way that men have sometimes gone, hey, this is an all-male panel, I'll step back so a woman can come and be on here. And I would love to see that happening more with cultures in New Zealand too, of perhaps if you're asked to do something and you know there's an expert in another culture, if it's a cultural thing, to maybe step back and say, can we find a voice in that culture to do it? Would be amazing.
Yeah, that definitely would be. But you know what I find amazing is that article that I spoke to you about, the fake away one, that was a client who messaged me. And so I feel like the message is like getting there, you know, that people are associating me because they were like, oh, you should write to this person and tell them why that is not butter chicken. And I was like,
or even go, here's the fake away recipe, here's how I would do it. If I have to make butter chicken, this is how I would do it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And everyone out there, go and get some Dolly Mumma. If you're in New Zealand, it's beautiful. You don't ship overseas, do you? Because it's perishable.
No, we don't ship currently. It's in the too hard basket for now. But it's in my notion.
If you want to arrange a big overseas order to be stocked at your shop, I'm sure that person will be open to talking about it.
Yes, we'll figure that out then.
We'll figure it out. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day.
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Yay. Me too.
I'm going to sound incredibly self-indulgent here, but I have to admit that one of my favourite parts of running the Map It Marketing podcast and hosting this and talking to you every week is I also get to talk to such amazing people who I find so inspiring, and Perzen's definitely one of those. Not only do I get to work with her as her coach, which is a tremendous privilege, I get to learn from her too. She challenges me all the time and reminds me to try new things that she's always coming to me and saying, have you thought about this for my business? And I think, I might try that for myself. I wanted just to share a few things here. One of the things is, like other businesses, I mentioned this before, remember you get to choose the size and the pace of growth and everything in your business, and whatever you decide is A-OK. The second thing I want to cover with this is to be aware of our own cultural limitations or understandings and think about how this might impact the way we market, the way we talk to people, or the way that we let other people impact us with sharing their culture, and how you could adapt that and use that in your own business. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I'd love it if you rated and reviewed it so that other people can trust it, or if you just share it with a friend and say, hey, have a listen to this. And for those of you that have enjoyed this podcast, I really hope that you come and check in next week's, or go and have a listen to some of our older episodes and find out more about some of the business owners and some of the marketing advice that I share in our weekly podcast on Map It Marketing. Have a great week. If you love what you heard today, be sure to hit subscribe. And if you loved this episode in particular, I'd love it if you shared it on social media. Remember to tag me in so I can say thank you. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon.